welcome to this week's episode of Not D&D, brought to you by EM World. I am your host, Jessica, and this week we have Jay and Dave here to tell us all about their game, Ready, Set, Bake. It's a fantastic, delicious, edible tabletop RPG, which is the theme of all the games this month, so I'm really excited to hear more about it from you. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, great to be here.
So how about you do a little intro to yourselves and how you're involved with the game and what you did for it. So Jay, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So I was the game designer. It was the first game that I ever tried to make. It did fairly well. So I came up with like the rules, the playtesting, and that sort of thing, and then handed it off to Dave, who is my partner in crime. And he did all the layout. Dave, do you want to talk about the challenges?
Yeah.
I mean, I am Dave. I did all the layout and probably tossed an idea or two over the fence, but I don't remember which ones. And I'm a graphic designer by trade, full-time for a dozen years. So to me, this was a fun chance to put together something without any creative restraints, where I didn't have anyone giving me a brief or telling me how it should look, as long as Jay was cool with it. So I really enjoyed getting to stretch some creative muscles on this one.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And what sort of graphic design do you do in your day job? And is it very different for doing role-playing games, or is there a lot of crossovers in kind of, the idea behind it?
I'm a member of an in-house marketing team. And so probably the closest thing that's comparable is that I do catalogs every year.
Okay.
That are, anywhere between 40 and 70 pages. So I'm familiar with the format and like the paper types or things like that. But in terms of content, very different.
Yeah, I was about to say, because communicating concepts through games is a different layout challenge, and the graphic design and the layout of that can add so much to games, I feel. And we've got some pictures on the screen if you're watching live. Hello. And if you're listening on the podcast, if you click through, you'll be able to see some images of things we have there as well. But tell you what, let's get involved. Let's dig into it and talk about the game. Actually, no, first I'm going to be nosy like I always am and talk about the two of you a bit more, if that's okay. So I always dig in and ask about your background and history with games. So that the first classic question, Jay, I'll ask you is, do you remember the first tabletop role-playing game that you played?
Yes, it's the game we're not allowed to talk about.
It was Dungeons & Dragons. We can talk about it. It exists.
It was 3.5. So Dave and some of our college friends sat down and played a game, and I was like, I don't know what this is about. So I was kind of like sitting off to the side, playing with some yarn, and they got to the end of the module and they go, so we don't have a healer and we ran out of healing potions. Do you want to come play a cleric next week? And we had like barely started dating at that point. So that was my classic get invited to play the cleric because someone wanted to play a healer. Got it.
That was only it was the same thing. I had one session before Jay joined. That module was only a 3-session thing, and then it was over and we're like, well, now what? And I'm like, I love stories. I'm a writer. I'll DM. And have been doing that ever since.
Literally the following week. He played 3 sessions and was like, yeah, I could do this, and ran semester-long campaigns for years.
Oh, wow. So your like tabletop journey like really happened to like together really at similar times then. So that's fantastic. I mean, obviously it started with Dungeons & Dragons, which is where a lot of people are because it's one of the, the biggest dominant games in the hobby, which makes sense. But your game is obviously, I wouldn't say Dungeons & Dragons inspired for Ready, Set, Bake. We'll talk about the inspiration in a bit. But where did you go from Dungeons & Dragons? Because it's clear you have some experience and knowledge of other game systems. So where did you go next?
I think it was Call of Cthulhu. So it was, very different. We played some D20 Modern, I think. There were some homebrew stuff thrown around. And it wasn't until, maybe 8 or 9 years, and I had started GMing 5th edition, which is my first time GMing, and really like, this system, I feel like I'm fighting it all the time. So I was inspired to come up with a different kind of experience, especially for people that are like, oh, so you play role-playing games, what's that? And so like a lot of my like friends and family and people that I knew weren't gamers. And so I really was looking for like, how do I introduce them to the concept of gaming with something that they could understand in like, you know, the Monopoly version, the Yahtzee version of role-playing games.
I feel like it's also worth mentioning that you had started playing a good deal of Powered by the Apocalypse games, which
It's
definitely take a different approach to how players interact with the game.
Yeah, I was playing a lot of Masks at the time, Masks of New Generation, and Plate and Monster of the Week, and kind of playing around with some of those more Powered by the Apocalypse style 2d6, very, very streamlined, but narrative heavy games.
Well, I guess that leads us really nicely into talking about Ready, Set, Bake. So this was the kind of idea of what you were talking about there. You wanted something a bit more kind of accessible for people that weren't already in the hobby. Yeah, so give us the pitch. So if somebody's not heard of Ready, Set, Bake, what is this game?
This game is, what if you were a contestant on the Great British Bake Off without calling it the Great British Bake Off? And instead of having to cook things, you got to look at a table of ingredients, like literally like an Excel table, not a laid out table, and mad-lib your way to a recipe. And roll some dice, see how well you did, and then narrate it for the judge and see what the judge thinks.
Gorgeous. I love that idea. So I guess the idea behind it was exactly what you said. You're trying to pick a topic that's not intimidating to people that aren't into gaming. So if someone's like, oh, I know what a baking show is, I've watched the Great British Bake Off, or non-copyright derivative of, so I guess that makes it a bit easier to get into. One thing I noticed is the length of the game was really, it can be like 30 minutes to 2 hours. Was that an intentional choice to keep it short for kind of newer players, or?
Yes and no. Part of that came out of playtesting, where I was trying to, there was one day I was trying to jam 2 different playtesting sessions, and I had like a 4-hour span. So I was like, well, it's got to be less than 2 hours each. How do I make this go faster? So simultaneous rolling and like players doing things at the same time while I'm doing, you know, some GM stuff in the background, it really helped keep that pace going while allowing everybody a spotlight. So you can play it in as little as 30 minutes, which is great for kids. I wouldn't suggest, you know, super young. They still need to be able to read the ingredients and understand like how a mad-lib works. But it's pretty simple, streamlined. I've played it with older generations. I've played it with kids. Just to kind of have that shorter attention span and the faster pace, and not adding anything that's too different than their normal everyday. Let's help mom in the kitchen sort of thing.
It's also worth adding that it really depends on the group and how much any given player wants to lean into having a quirky personality the way we're used to on the Great British Bake Off, because so frequently it's how those bakers approach the recipe and their little quirks that make them stand out, and some players really want to lean into that and have do a whole extra role play on top of the actual mechanical bits. And some people are, more or less streamlined in their approach. So that also varies the runtime quite a lot.
Well, I mean, it's got a really clear inspiration. If I'm sitting down to play this game, it sounds like, from a brief explanation, I know exactly kind of, what's going on thematically in the game. So mechanically, what does the game look like? How did you approach this, Jay? So you had the idea, wanting to do something like this. Where did we go from there?
Bear with me. It's been about 6 years since I was writing it. I have to think back a little bit. I really wanted something that, because baking shows rely so much on that particular baker or that particular cook's expertise, I didn't want people to feel intimidated to say, but I'm not a chef. I'm not a professional baker. I don't know what these things mean or do or how do they go together. Yeah. So adding that randomness to it and like being able to roll on tables or like pick one, roll one, or pick off of a D100 table. Some of that's that Call of Cthulhu-ness coming back of like just being able to like roll on a table, roll under, fill in the blanks, those sorts of things. And I love rollable tables. I love being able to just sit down and not have any idea what I'm going to play. I love that the host doesn't necessarily know what all of the themes are going to be. I remember there was one playtesting game that I ended up rolling vegan on the last one that we had, and one particular player was playing like with a really thick accent, and it was like, and I made the recipe better by adding bacon because I hate vegan, and just like went off, and everybody was cracking up, and it was a fun time. But he would not have done that had it, you know, I'd been like, oh, well, this is your kind of character, I'll cater to that. No, I let the dice decide. So it's, everything's a rollable table, everything's flexible. People can add and remove rules if they feel like it, or simplify it, or whatever. So
beautiful.
Idea module.
And sometimes you end up with very weird combinations that would not actually work, and the fun is in trying to justify it to the judges.
So like a combination of ingredients that would not be good.
Yeah, like spinach and uzu.
That, I mean, okay. Yeah,
you know, there's one that's called retro. So, you know, there was a lot of Jello.
Yes,
that's what come up. Or they'd be like, yeah, I'm gonna combine like cabbage and cream cheese in my cake. Like, just really off the wall bunker stuff, and that's part of the fun.
Gorgeous. I love that. So how does the game session actually work? So we talked a little bit about there's, you know, lots of tables to roll on, and we have a rough idea of what we're doing. We're characters in a baking contest, but what actually does sitting down to play the game look like?
Right. So the basics are sit down at the table with everybody, figure out, okay, what kind of baker are you playing? So you're rolling on what age, what continent are you from, what is your style of baking, and what is your personality. And then you'll break it up into 3 different recipes. So each recipe has a different theme, just like a theme week for baking. So it could be, like I said, retro, it could be cakes, it could be cookies, biscuits, that sort of thing. Or it could be something that is selected ahead of time if people kind of like know what they want to play, or if it's at a con and you're like, I have an idea of how I want this to run. And then everybody rolls for 3 different sections of each recipe. So you have, so they are preparation, bake, presentation. So you're rolling dice based off of each of those steps, and whoever gets like the best total for that recipe is the winner for that round. But you're also building your recipe out of words and a mad-lib as you go. So you kind of have some more mechanical minded, and then you've got over here, you've got your creative and your mad-lib. And you do 3 of those, and that's the game. It's very, very simple, but can be a lot of fun.
Fab. I love that. And so everything you described, again, feels very accessible for players. If you've played a board game or something like that, it's not gonna feel too intimidating. The time frame, again, isn't too much of a commitment if people aren't sure. As Dave, you mentioned as well, people can put as much kind of role play into it as they want. They can really go for it, or if they're a bit more shy and just trying it out, you know, there's things for them to lean on and not have to be this wacky character if they don't want to. But so I wonder what the GM experience is like. So I don't know if either of you could kind of speak to that. Like, how does it feel running it if you're perhaps new to role-playing games, and what kind of role do you take as the person running the game?
There was probably within the first like month of me officially releasing the game and putting a price on it on Itch and Drive-Thru, I got notified by someone that there was going to be a virtual convention playing my game.
Oh.
And I was like, I don't even know who this person is who's running it. This is really strange and weird. The internet works in mysterious ways. And so I joined as a player just to see how someone else who didn't know me and hadn't been in one of my games would approach the game. And there were a few things that they like had read through the book and didn't really quite understand, or thought they read it one way and interpreted it differently. We still had a ton of fun. It was great, but it was nice to see that someone could just pick up the rules and go, I'm going to run this for a bunch of random people. I've never run this before. I've only read it a couple of times. Let's do it. And so that revealed to me a little bit about the things that I needed to re-emphasize and like tweak a couple of sentences here and there to just make it more clear. But it's pretty easy to just pick up and play, which was really great to kind of like, I didn't ask anyone to do that. They just found my game and decided to do it.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like a fly on the wall.
Yeah. I love that you stealthed in. Did you? And I guess you didn't let them know you're the designer.
I didn't until the end.
Oh, wow.
And I said, I'm sorry, everyone. I have to reveal that I cheated. And everybody was really confused. And they're like, this is a dice game and a role-playing game. How did you cheat? And I go, well, I wrote the game. And they all went, what? And I was like, yeah, I'm so glad you guys had fun. Like, is there anything I can clarify for you? Can I make things clearer? You know, I was so glad to just sit and get to play my own game for once. And it was really special.
And it's almost invaluable blind feedback at playtesting as well. And yeah, that is my worst nightmare as someone that runs games, though, is I sit and find out one of the people that worked on the games there. I'm like, oh no, that I would be so panicked about that. So I think that's really funny that happened.
Yeah, and he was a little intimidated, the person who was running the game, and I was like, don't worry about it, you did great. Like, he's like, I didn't really understand this one point, and I'm like, yep, you missed a sentence, it's over there, but you did fine. Like, you picked it up and ran with it, and that's fine, and everybody had a great time. So it was really great feedback to just get to sit in my own game with no one knowing who I was or that I'd made it. So
yeah, perfect. One thing I do want to say is, as we mentioned, the game is out and available. So if you're interested, it's available on itch and DriveThruRPG. The links are on the screen for anyone watching. And if you're listening, the links are in the show notes. So if it sounds a little bit interesting to you, go have a look, download it, because the best way to support indie tabletop RPG creators is to buy their stuff if you can. One thing I want to talk about in the game as well is, I know this is like a follow-on that's coming on as Ready, Set, Feast.
Yes.
So could you talk a little bit about this game?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about my history with role-playing games, and I always forget that before there was Dungeons and Dragons, there was the early aughts tabletop role-playing games that didn't use dice. It was all narrative, it was forum-based, it was a lot of people just coming up with characters in fandoms and having a great time with it. So I was extremely involved from the age of about 11 or 12 in the Redwall role-playing space. And so I was very familiar with the concept of like getting a character, but it was always going to be an animal, and it was anthropomorphic, and it could talk, and it had an accent, and all of these things. So Ready, Set, Feast is a mashup between Redwall, the book series, and Ready, Set, Bake. So it's very focused on community and woodland animals getting together and having a feast at the end of the season. So what does that look like? What places can they go? Do they go up a tree? Do they dig for something? Do they go in the water? Do they go find something in the larder? And how can they then create these recipes together? Very communal based, very heavy on that. Very like childlike, only because that's a lot of times kids' first interactions with that idea of like stone soup and those sorts of traditions, I guess. So that's Ready, Set, Feast. So it's a twist on a lot of the same mechanics, but in a different setting and slightly different mechanics.
Love that. And it's up right now on itch at the moment. So if people are interested in that, they can go download that as well.
It is pay what you want. There are community copies. So if you feel like, hey, I don't really know what this game is, I want to help test it, or I just want to read it, go ahead, download it. No problem. If you have any questions, our contact information is there, or you can reach out to any of us. Yeah.
Fab. I love that. That was great. Thank you so much. I think we're coming up to near the end of our time on the show. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing Ready, Set, Bake and Ready, Set, Feast with us. Before you go, I do have a final question, though. I'd like to ask if you have any other games that you'd like to give a shout out to. And the rules are it can't be a game that you've made and it can't be Dungeons and Dragons. So, Dave, how about I start with you? What would be the game you want to shout out?
Any of the Without Number games by Kevin Crawford. So that's Stars Without Number, Worlds Without Number, Cities Without Number, or Ashes Without Number. They all have the same basic mechanical structure. They're sort of, they're OSR, but with a new Renaissance sort of take. I discovered them, I want to say 6-7 years ago, and they've pretty much been all I've been running since.
Oh, wow.
And I'm currently working on a steampunk game using that same SRD.
Perfect.
I do love it that much.
Well, we'll have to have you back on to talk about that game in the future another time then. So, yeah.
Be delighted.
Yeah. And Jay, same question to you.
Okay, so mine is completely different. It is a lightweight game. It is called A Council of Cats.
Lovely.
It is by my friend, Mr. Reciprocity. And it is literally, you are cats. You are divine. You are regal. You're chaos. And so you get to play as actual cats. And I just think that that's wonderful. And if anyone wants to play it, please let me know. I'd love to play it.
Fantastic. That's two great recommendations there. Thank you both so much for coming on the show and talking to us about Ready, Set, Bake. As I mentioned, sounds like you have other games that you're cooking up already. So love to have you back on to talk about other games in the future. Love to have you back on to discuss. And of course.
Thank you so much.
And thanks to everyone who has watched and listened. We'll be back next week with another tabletop RPG around the culinary theme for you. So thanks very much. And for now, we'll say goodbye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, folks.